Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, music team. Well, like Carl had mentioned, this Thursday, I had uh, I had some skin cancer removed from my chin and up on my forehead. I actually had it back in 2008, so I began to recognize that when you get a pimple and it doesn't go away after about 3 weeks, it's something to get looked at. And so yeah, I decided not to wear a Band-Aid today. It seems like a bandage conjures up. The imagination just goes wild at what might be underneath that Band-Aid. So like I said, I got a little 1-inch zipper here for about a week and a half, and then I'll have the stitches taken out. But yeah, it's like I said, I noticed that and up near the hairline, and so I had both removed here on Thursday. I figured, Halloween was a good time to have stitches in my face. So official good morning. Picture four agnostics sitting in the park. And the first person says, you ever wonder if there's a God? And the second person looks at him and says, well, how can you look at this beautiful park, this world, this universe, without appreciating that there must be a higher intelligence? The third person says, well, I don't know. They say it's intelligence design, but all I see is chaos. And the fourth person says, I don't need to know or to have God prove God's self to me because I intuitively know that there is a God. Then suddenly all four of these people have this vision, and God says, over 100 yards to your left is a man sitting on a bench in a black jacket. Go to him. He's considering suicide. He needs some love. And the four of them go over there and they comfort the man, talk with him, help him through his crisis. And all five of them leave the park that day knowing that God exists. Now picture a group of 4 cells in my right lung. One of them says, do you think there's a Bob? And the second one says, well, how can you look at this amazing lung and this amazing body without believing that there's a Bob? And the third one says, I don't know, there don't seem to be very many signs of intelligence in this thing. It seems to be in chaos most of the time. And the fourth one says, I don't need any proof. I can intuitively feel that there is a Bob. And then suddenly all four of them hear, hello down there in my lungs, about 2 millimeters to your left, is a cell that's turning black. It has absorbed some of the anger that I had stuffed over time and is turning into a cancer cell. I want you to go over to it, show it, express love, make it turn back into a normal cell or be released through the systems of my body. Back when I started this series of lessons called The Creative Process, I talked about how, our founder, Myrtle Fillmore, back in the 1880s, had been diagnosed with tuberculosis. She was told that that it runs in her family and that she should expect it to happen, and sure enough, in her 40s, she gets tuberculosis. But she hears a speaker come through town and talk about, just meditating, praying, focusing on your organs and stuff like that and blessing your body. And she says that the main thing she remembered coming out of that is, if I am a child of God, how can I inherit sickness? And it took her about 2 years from the way she described it, but she would just sit and quietly recognize that she had been cursing her body for most of her life, and she just needed to once again shift that attitude. And so she started talking to her lungs and saying, just loving them and knowing that they would be expressing perfect health once again. And then they started to apply it to other areas of their life. Myrtle was healed. Charles, her husband, was kind of like, well, we got to learn more about this. But then they were able to figure out how to have a consistent financial supply, prosperity, have occupations that fulfilled them. And this is what the creative process is about. Now, back when Carla and I were serving the congregation down in Hollywood, Florida, down there near Miami, this one woman who was a regular, was dating a fellow who was, I think he was Lutheran or something like that. And she said that one of his friends, when he found out she was in Unity, says, "Oh, you people in Unity, you're scary. You think you're God." And as she shared that with me, I started thinking about it. It's like, yeah, I mean, I look at the way most people grow up, in a Christian, especially, background, but even in Jewish and some of the other spiritual traditions, they believe this thing that's detached from them, an old man with a beard sitting on a cloud. So if I was picturing myself as that, yeah, that would be scary. But instead, we look at ourselves as being cells in the body of something much larger than us. We have an opportunity to express all things that are God, all things that are good, through our bodies and into the world to make this world a better place. And that is why we get, dominion over our minds, our bodies, and our affairs. And when we start to recognize that we can have a full spectrum prosperity, the area of health, of relationships, of occupation, of spiritual awareness, and then, of course, having the financial supply, the money that we need to pay all of our bills. And it seems like most people have a deficiency in at least one of those areas. So in the creative process, there was a sense of like, okay, let's look at what you want to create in your own life, and then what you want to create to make this world a better place. So let's act as if we're part of something much larger than ourselves. In biblical times, if the adult son of a father came into town, he was considered a legal representative of his father. And so when we have this whole mythology of Christianity, that sense that the Father and the Son, so Jesus was the Son, the legal representative of God. But it wasn't just limited to him. It's limited, all of us can express that divinity that's within us. Any child of God must grow to be an adult of God. Now, one of the things that can be kind of scary if you're thinking about a God up on a cloud is that God is already doing all that God can do in your life. And what I found in my life was that I was just blocking that good from flowing through me with my attitudes, with my assumptions about the way the world worked and the way God worked. So the only thing that was standing between me and my manifestation was letting go and allowing it to happen. I was talking with somebody recently about how especially millennials are looking for Unity's philosophy and Unity's belief system. But of course, they hear people like like Pat Robertson and some of these other evangelicals who get so much airtime, and they think that's what all of Christianity is like. We're positive, practical, and progressive in unity. And we look at the Bible by recognizing that there are these embedded symbolism in all of the narrative stories. And so the creative process is us looking at the symbolism of the first chapter of Genesis, the beginning of the Bible. And this is how we create, how our minds create. It happens within each of us. So at the beginning, I asked you to look at what do you want to release and what do you want to create. And Jillian, if you go ahead and put up the first slide here, just a quick review of what we've covered so far. The first day, let there be light, and that symbolized illumination. And that means that we have a spiritual awakening. We're aware that, hey, our mind is connected with the divine mind, and that we can have these divine ideas flow to us and through us. God is ready and available to us at all times, and when we turn to God, there are no limitations. Second day, the affirmation was, let there be a firmament, which meant basically, let there be a space for something to happen. And that represented faith. We needed to truly put our faith in that God presence and know that we are getting these divine ideas, and we have an opportunity to sort what is right for us to do and what is not right for us to do. And if you're questioning whether the guidance you're getting is truly divine guidance, ask, am I coming from love or am I coming from fear on this? And then ask, is this who I really am? Or is this maybe something that I was in the past that I don't need anymore? And then we would form the piles of yes and no, things that we wanted to create and things we wanted to release. The third day was let dry ground appear and let land produce vegetation. And that symbolized imagination. In our imaginations, we form the ideas that have been inspired by the divine mind. We build a plan, coming up with the ideas that have been flowing through us. Each of us has gifts, passions, and talents that we do very well, and that's our part to play in the world. The fourth day was, let there be two great lights, one to govern the day and one to govern the night. And that symbolized our faculties of understanding and willpower. Understanding are in like our conscious mind, and then willpower is almost unconscious. So the light of understanding is reflected by will, and will is that oomph that suddenly happens. Like I used the example of getting out of bed in the morning. You know, you'd be laying there when you first wake up, and then suddenly, you know, you're up because you have an understanding of something that you need to do or some time pressure that you have, and your willpower gets you moving. We need to move beyond dreaming about this project and then to actually doing something in the physical world. So let's move forward to the next slide. Let's look at the fifth day of creation. In the first book of Genesis, the 20th chapter. First chapter, 20th verse. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth and across the firmament of the sky. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. There's a common thread to the birds of the air and the creatures of the seas, and that is they're out of reach. You know, granted, we can go fishing and we can catch a bird, but the very moment we don't have our hands on them. The birds, of course, are in the highest, the lowest. What connects the divine ideas with the real world? And that is our intuition. It seems to be experienced mainly in two ways. One, that it is above all of our highest thoughts and deeper than our deepest emotions. Very rarely is it understood by our thinking or our emotional nature. But something tells me that this isn't new to you. I mean, most of the people who come to Unity, as they've done studies, you know, are intuitive people. So you probably have had this experience in your life of knowing that there's something that you should do. Yet society teaches us to think and feel about everything, thinking and emotion, and we develop this habit from a very young age of evaluating everything according to our intellect and our emotions. When in reality, it's our intuition that can lead us the right way. Now, a lot of you know I was a journalist for 17 years before Carl and I went on to first do seminars and then become Unity ministers. Back when I was in Chicago, one of the things I did was I worked for a magazine that covered commodities. And up in Chicago is the Chicago Board of Trade, but there's also the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and they've actually merged since I was a journalist back then. But in the Mercantile Exchange, what they would do, if you've ever seen the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, Dan Aykroyd wrote that from his experiences there in Chicago for Second City and learning about this, you know, this weird place where people would trade bets, you know, on a particular area. But the usefulness of it and how it all started was that farmers needed some way to guarantee that they could get a particular price at the end of the harvest season. What was happening was, you know, people would come to Chicago, there'd be this, you know, glut of things, and then farmers would dump things into the lake that they couldn't sell. So it was a very practical problem back then. So for example, let's say I'm planting corn, you know, and so at the beginning of the year I look at, okay, this is how much it's going to cost me, this is how much, you know, so when I have a harvest, if I can get a fair price for it, everything will be fine, we can cover all of our bills as a family, that sort of a thing. So what you do is you go to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or have your broker call them and say, I would like to buy a contract to sell my corn at X amount, whatever it is, you know, $7 a bushel per acre or something like that. And then someone in the pit there, as they call it, the traders would take the other side of that bet. Okay, I'll bet you on that. And so at the end of the year, you know, the farmer will get a fair price, whether it's lower or higher, you get your fair price, you know, and the broker has a way of just working this all out in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Well, there was one broker named Jack Sander who eventually became the chairman of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And he had a very rough week. And he's looking at the numbers and he's realizing, oh wow, you know, I'm near bankruptcy here. You know, and you have to put up 10% of whatever your contracts are, and he realized he didn't have that money. And he talked to one of his friends, Leo, and Leo talked with him. He says, would you be willing to help me sell all these contracts? Because you're only limited to sell a certain amount or buy a certain amount in the hour. So Leo said, yeah, sure. And they're ready for the markets to open. And Leo and Jack are standing there. And Jack just steps back a little bit and takes a deep breath and crouches down. And Leo's like, Jack, you all right? And Jack says, Leo, my intuition is telling me that I should not sell. And Leo looked at him and said, okay, trust your intuition. Let's not sell. Because what do you want to do? He says, well, let's just observe for 30 minutes. If things are really going south, I might change my mind. Well, for about 15 minutes, things were kind of stable, but then suddenly things took off. And Jack and Leo were kind of looking at each other, and Jack realized that if he had sold his contracts in that first 15 minutes, he really would indeed have gone bankrupt. But because the market was going up, Leo and Jack started to buy stuff. And he prospered from that thing. But that intuition, think about a time in your life when you had that kind of intuitive feeling. You knew what you needed to do. Yet your thinking and your emotions were getting in the way. You were trying to talk you out of it. So what I'd like you to do this week is to allow your intuition to bypass your thinking and feeling nature. Allow your intuition to bypass your thinking and emotional nature. Now, what's going on in your mind? What thoughts are you having about that? When your emotions and your thoughts are like, what? No, we can't let something else be in charge. Years ago, when Carl and I, before we started doing the seminars and all, I was watching Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth. It was released in 1988, a year after Joseph Campbell died. And Joseph Campbell was talking about, he was considered one of the world's highest authorities on mythology and stuff, comparative religion. And he talked about how, the problem with Western society is they teach us to lead with the head. And he says, no, there's something else, much more. There's a humankind and intuition that needs to lead. And you've got to allow your thinking and your emotions to follow it. So for this particular week, I want you to notice when your thinking and feeling is working in opposition to what it is you know you need to do. Albert Einstein, considered one of the world's greatest minds, and let me give you a quote from a book about him. And this is something he actually said in the book. Indeed, it is not knowledge and empiricism, but intuition which advances humanity. Now, here's Albert Einstein. For those of you who don't know his story, when he was a young man, he started having these visions of the way physical science really is compared to what the common wisdom was about physical science. He published papers, and people laughed at him until some of the people started to actually apply some experiments to what it was he was talking about, and they found he's right. Knowledge is necessary too. An intuitive child couldn't accomplish anything without some knowledge. There will come a point, though, in everyone's life when only intuition can make the leap ahead, without ever knowing precisely how. One can never know why, but one must accept that intuition is a fact. So that's Albert Einstein. So you know what you need to do. It may be an inconvenience to you, but you know what you need to do. It may delay your gratification, but you know what you need to do. You may be walking into the jaws of your biggest fear, but you know it's what you need to do. It's hard to justify, but you know it's what you need to do. It defies logic, it defies reason, but you know it's what you need to do. Everyone around you disagrees and thinks you're crazy, but you know knows what you need to do. Describes me when I was considering becoming a minister. But another thing happens when we live our lives intuitively, and that is we start to perceive the world in an entirely different way. We notice opportunities where we never noticed we find doors to walk through. Doors in places where we didn't even think to look for doors before. One of William Blake's poems, he wrote, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through the narrow chinks in his cavern." So, of course, in New Thought in general and in the broader New Age, there's this concept of see God in everything. But when you're living intuitively, you're not trying to see God in everything, you're seeing God in everything. You actually see the good. As I say so many times, when you're in a crisis mode or in fear, it's like, okay, God, show me the good in this. And allow that to be revealed. We need to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. Don't mess with nothing, Mr. In Between. I wish I had thought about that before. I mean, you could have done that today. So, ask yourself, within yourself, what do I need to do? And instead of turning it over to your thinking nature, which will pull out the calculator and the slide rules, of course, slide rules, everything's on computer nowadays, or your emotions like, it's like, no, let the intuition move forward. It's similar to, I guess divine ideas are kind of similar to electricity. I mean, you can plug anything into the wall, whether it's the most simple of items like a coffee maker or as complex as a computer. It draws upon the electricity, and this is what we do. We draw upon that energy of the creative process of God and allow these things to happen. So, Jillian, if you put up the slide, we've got this week's takeaways. So, for this week, and for this week only, I mean, you can't walk around all the time with your thinking and emotional nature shut down. I'm really not asking for shut down, but I'm just asking them to just kind of, okay, sit in the balcony for this week, and allow intuition to lead. So let the intuition or your wisdom within lead. Bypass your thinking and emotions. Be in the flow of divine substance, this energy of God that can be formed into anything. Apply wisdom to any area of your life in which you may be working on your creative project for these weeks, whether it's your health, your relationships, your occupation, your spiritual awareness, your financial supply. And then tithe in any area of your life. You want more, give. I mean, Myrtle Fillmore literally looked, okay, we got 24 hours in a day, so she would spend 1/10 of that, 2 hours and 24 minutes, focused on her project, which was to heal her body. And the affirmation for this week is, I keep my wisdom in heaven and my feet on earth. I keep my wisdom in heaven and my feet on earth. Let's say that together. I keep my wisdom in heaven and my feet on earth. Now, the title of this morning's lesson was Together We Can Do It Yourself. In Austin, Texas, there was a family-owned hardware store and plumbing supply called Harold's Supply and Service Center. And it's one of these places you go, and the guys who work there knew everything, and as far as how to fix stuff. So let's say you wanted to fix something in your home, you'd go to Harold's, and they'd show you what you need. They'd even loan you the tools to do the job, and they'd walk you through what you need to do. And their slogan was, together we can do it yourself. Together we can do it yourself. So you're not alone. You are part of something much larger than yourselves. And one of the amazing things, of course, is when you are connected with God and living intuitively, yes, you'll find that God sends other people to you to help you along your way. When you are radiating love and God's energy, other people are willing to work collaboratively with you. So, together we can do it yourself. Our closing story is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
At a small university near Birmingham, Alabama, we found a big guy. 6'8", 310-pound senior offensive lineman George Grimwade is a dominating force on the Sanford Bulldog football team. Over the last 4 years, the name Grimwade has become synonymous with muscle and might. But this story will surely change that.
George is a kind person, and he's proven that through life many, many times. That's what this is all about.
Michael Musto is George's stepdad. He married George's mom, Michelle, when George was in 5th grade, and the two have gotten along famously ever since.
He was just a sweet young man.
Until Michael Musto came along, George never had a regular male presence in his life.
I was trying to win.
So they bonded over football, especially.
You didn't get to see the game last night.
It's just how we've always communicated, through sports.
It's more, I love you.
It's definitely neither of those, I'll be honest with you. I think we just talk football. I don't think there's any grunting or...
It's safe to say you've never said it as well. As
No,
you said it that day.
that's the ultimate way to show him how much I love him, was to do this.
Earlier this month, George pulled off one of the most memorable moments in Sanford football history. A sneak play that his stepdad especially never saw coming.
It's official. The play was certified by a judge, designed by seam ripper, needle and thread, and executed by number 76 himself.
I jogged over to my dad. My dad goes, "What are you doing?"
He's got some papers in his hand. I don't know what he's doing.
Hey, you know how much I love you, right?
Yeah.
And I always treasure the time and everything.
Yeah.
Now you're my world. I got my last name changed. Give me my jersey.
I saw my name on that jersey. It was like, wow. This kid really loves me. I couldn't get the words out of my mouth.
When you saw my son.
It took my voice away. And he's just the best.
For a stepdad, it's hard to imagine a higher honor. For a football player, hard to imagine a greater show of strength. Because George didn't just change the letters on his jersey that day. He put his heart on his sleeve. And the name for that is Hero. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Birmingham, Alabama.
Our closing Bible verse is from Proverbs, 24th chapter, 13th verse. Eat honey, for it is good, and the drippings of the honeycomb are sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is the same to your soul. If you find it, there will be a future, and your hope will not be cut off. May you always be open to God's guidance and grace. Let's prepare for meditation.